After recognition of visitors, there's going to be a recognition of student recipients of NAACP awards done by Ann Beekman. The second edition, adding to new business F, PreK contracts, another one needs to be signed. Adding to new business, item G, discussion of vote results. Adding to new business H, discussion about interim steps for, oops, not cogs, dogs. Spell checker doesn't get those. We can talk about cogs as well, but I'm going with dogs. And item 5, adding to new business I, the superintendent search discussion. With that, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes of November 6th, which was our last meeting, and November 13th and 14th. Thank you, David Scholes, for those, which were the 2 information sessions for the vote.
So moved.
Thank you, Ann.
Second.
Thank you, Sean. Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes of November 6th, November 13th, and November 14th, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Ayes, abstentions?
I'm abstaining. I wasn't here for November 6th.
Okay, the ayes.
I abstain.
You
Is that,
abstain?
well, I didn't go to the 13 and 14.
Oh, okay, so you
I was there
abstain.
on the 6th.
So you abstain on the 13th and 14th.
Yes.
Maybe I should not do this as a slate then, huh? Should I do them separately?
If it matters, I don't know whether.
Well, we still have a quorum actually approving, so let's go with it in the interest of time. The ayes appear to have it, the ayes do have it, the motion carries. Recognition of visitors. Ms. Normando, please, and so I should say quickly, if when you're speaking, please state your name, please address the chair, please, I know, Jody, we've been through this a few times in our life together, please avoid any personal attacks. We're all trying to model the finest behavior for our students, and we have 2 in our midst. Yes, Ms. Normando.
Just a suggestion of how of meeting procedure. Under new business, many boards do not put action on any new business. They allow it to come in, and then they'll allow the week or the next week or what meeting to talk about it before they take any action on it. And I was just suggesting that that would be a good procedure to do, because then you're not voting on something you've just seen. Thank you.
Thank you for the suggestion. Maybe we'll think about doing that where it's really a PreK contract, maybe not, some other things, maybe. Your point taken. Thank you. Is there anybody else that has something?
Hi, my name is Devin Rhodes. I come representing Team Tenny as a spokesperson and president. Eager to be here tonight to represent our group. We've kind of laid low, stayed out of the initial process of the boards carrying over. With the whole turf discussion, we've wanted to stay out of it, but with the new field study and our name being thrown back into things, we wanted to be here to represent our group and to hopefully request to be a part of this study, being that we had a relationship with the finance committee previously and we were working towards a common goal.
So it appears to me at this point that we're not going to be really discussing that because Steve Perrin can't be here tonight. So I could put you under additional agenda items. The next meeting we're having is going to be a high school sort of budgeting centric meeting, as well as a finance committee meeting which handles buildings and grounds. So because it would have to be the end of the meeting and it's quite a packed agenda, in the interest of your sanity and getting a board that is still awake, it might make sense for us to talk about this next time, because there is a Steve Perrin from the high school is working on getting some quotes, but we don't have them tonight, so we can't even talk about anything. It's unfortunate. So you're welcome to stay.
That'd be perfect, though. If we could be thrown into the agenda along with that discussion topic for next time, that'd be very appreciated for us to get our message across as well. Thank you.
And with that, I will move on to Ann Beekman for our first edition, which is recognition of student recipients of the NAACP awards.
Hi. On Saturday night, I had the great honor of attending the Windham County chapter of the NAACP's first annual Freedom Fund Dinner. It was a lovely time. I recommend everybody get tickets for it next year. However, 2 of our VUHS students were recognized with Youth in Action Courage Awards. And in light of that, I would like to offer a resolution to this board. Be it resolved that the Windham Southeast School District Board acknowledges and congratulates Brattleboro Union High School students Z. Mohammed and Royalty Ricardo on their Youth and Action Courage Awards given to them by the Windham County NAACP at their annual Freedom Fund Dinner on Saturday, November 16th, 2019. The board wishes to express its great pride in and respect for these exceptional students, as well as our deep gratitude for the important work that they're doing to further justice and equity in our communities and in our world.
Thank you. Round of applause for.
They are a pair of exceptional kids.
And I just realized why we have 2 students present. You are the student council representatives, aren't you? Yes. So would you like to join us at the table this evening? Yes. We have name tags for you and everything, so you're official. So can we, maybe that's the best side. Maybe we can kind of scoot around. And how fortunate for me, because I have known you since, well, you were I've known you since you were both in diapers, so.
Thanks for
Yes.
Thanks for sharing.
For you.
Since I've known you this long, I know you're not shy, so do you mind introducing yourself, or just maybe saying a few words about yourself, just so we can get to know some faces? It's always nice to know some faces.
Sure. So my name is Amelia, and I'm the student council president. I'm a senior this year, and we will be having student council board members. We attended the first meeting officially 2 weeks ago, I guess it was, and we're going to be having a rotating group of members, so you'll see a lot of different faces each time, but we'll all introduce ourselves.
Hi, I'm Sarah Gordon-Macy. I'm also a senior and a member of student council.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
We're glad you're joining us today. Moving on to communications. I sent a normal laundry list of communications. Anybody else have any additional communications to add? Oh, we're cooking through this agenda. This is going to be awesome. We're going to be out of here in no time. So committee reports. Finance committee, I have linked the minutes. We have not met since the last meeting. We meet monthly. Do we have anything else to add, Sean?
I don't believe that we do, just we had a report on the 6th.
Right.
So I think we're covered, and we'll meet again the first meeting of the month
Excellent.
at 5 o'clock.
Looking forward to it. Personnel. Not met since? Excellent. Policy. We have not met. I gave policy and amendment the 2 weeks off because we worked very hard and we had to have the information meetings too. PPE.
So we didn't meet, but can I announce what we'll be talking about in case people want to?
Yes.
Okay. So tomorrow. For me? Oh. So tomorrow we'll be having our programmatic and performance equity subcommittee meeting. It'll be here at Green Street, and it's been changed back and forth from 6 to 7 p.m. So it's 7 p.m. if anybody's attending, or if you have a friend that's planning to attend. So what we'll be doing is we'll be reviewing Lyle had sent us 2 different sets of data on after-school care. So those folks who did bring after-school care to us in Putney, or people who are just in general interested in after-school care, we are going to be reviewing that data, at least for the first round. Nobody has reviewed it yet. So we really don't know. We'll probably definitely need more data as we kind of look at it and assess, okay, what does all this mean? But that'll be our first pass. So if you're interested in that conversation, please do come. We'll also just be reviewing a little bit of Title IX requirements around equity and field access. We, we'll be looking at the fields, as we said, in a few weeks, but we just wanted to update ourselves on what are actually the requirements and just be a little bit more well-versed in kind of legal statutes. So I know the committee will be delving into that. And we're meeting with Tyne Reed. Teen Reed tomorrow. She'll be joining us for the first 45 minutes just to talk about the data that exists in the district and what they're collecting around mathematics, just to get ourselves a little bit more well-versed in that. So join if you feel so moved.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Jody Norman from Dummerston. One of the things that I would like the committee to look into, or a couple of things, I guess, but I'd like to know the equity of cost that goes per student for outfitting a student for the sport. And the other thing that's come to my attention is that some of the middle schoolers get transportation to games, but I know Dummerston doesn't, and some other schools don't, so I think that needs to be looked at also. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Climate crisis, Thomas.
We haven't met yet since the last meeting, but we'll be meeting right here on December the 2nd at 6 p.m.
Excellent. Communications.
I sent around 3 press releases earlier, I think it was 3, that were sent out since the last meeting. Maybe I should have done 2, I may have changed it since writing this down. But I sent those just for people's reviews. They've been sent to Christina and Ann and approved prior to sending out via Barb. We do actually have a mission statement. I don't know if we want to look at it tonight or put it off for next time, but we had finalized a mission statement at our last meeting. We wanted to talk a little bit about that we essentially come to the conclusion that we should expand the committee. Because we're such a committee of 3, we keep running into quorum issues and trying to discuss things and send drafts, but running the risk of running afoul of the open meeting law. So more members would help with that situation somewhat. I talked to David about potentially joining, and I think that was agreeable. But if anyone else would like to join, either from the public or the board, we're going to be open to that.
So, does anybody have an objection to David Scholes joining the Communications Committee?
When I can do it.
When you can do it.
Yeah.
But in that way, 2 people can talk about something and not violate open meeting law because it would be a quorum. So that way, with 4 people, 2 people is not in the quorum. So that's very helpful. No objections? Thank you, David, for volunteering for yet another committee. I appreciate that. It would be nice to have 2 more people to be on some of the committees. And then diversity and equity.
Has not met.
Okay, and WSESU, we met Monday night. Does anybody else want to cover that? Who was there? We met Monday night to approve a good pile of warrants. And then we had a pretty, and then I guess the communication was given that Lyle Holiday will be retiring at the end of this year, which I have listed in your communications list. And then we had our initial run-through with the budget with Frank, looking at the incoming grants, which Paul Smith provided. Frank sort of walked us through the whole new accounting system, which was very fun for me. And then a little refresher for those of us on this finance committee. And then we had our initial contract negotiations because the contract with the teachers and staff is negotiated at the WSESU level. So met with Carrie, who's the chair of the Vernon board, to have the initial discussion on contract negotiations. Did I miss anything?
Just that we've scheduled 2 meetings on the next 2 Mondays. And the second one, on December 2nd, we'll have a special ed focus. So I think we'll be with Shelley and Lisa with us. Good to see you again.
I got it all? Excellent. So, admin update.
Can I make an announcement?
Of course.
I don't think it is well known that Lyle was retiring at the end of the school year. I think we should take the time to honor her work, not only as superintendent, but her work in our school district for 30 plus years. I think she deserves some recognition for her contributions to our school district.
We were kind of surprised, we didn't have a lot of time for anything. I suspect we'll probably come up with something like
I think this will be the tip of the honoring iceberg.
the beginning of the season.
We're all just trying to get over the shock of it and trying to figure out how we can make it go away. Ripping up the letter was not successful, but thank you for that. So, we have a lot of elementary principals here tonight, and I know the principals work very hard, so we have moved, even though this is new business, moved it up early into an admin update so they can go home and get some sleep. So, Lyle, take it away.
So I've met with each of the elementary principals, and we've been looking at a number of things. We decided that, just for your information tonight, we're going to set aside capital plan, and Frank has said that we will, when we're in our budget process, we will spend at least one night just on capital plan. So they're going to leave that out tonight, but each one is going to talk a little bit about what they're thinking about with any programmatic changes, any professional development that might be needed to support any programs for the upcoming year. I've told them each they have 4 minutes, so we'll see who listens. So you want to start any order? Do you care? Okay, let's start at the north with Herb.
Okay,
and
great.
we'll just work our way south.
Thanks. I'm Herb Pelletier, for those who might not know me, principal at Putney Central School. Each year as we approach the budgeting process, we look first to see where we're going to fall if we just level program. In other words, we level fund the existing programs. Then we take a look at things that we might want to shift around, add, rearrange, delete. And really, for the coming year, the two things that stand out the most is that we're pretty short-staffed right now with academic support people. We have one. We've had an increase in enrollment each of the past 2 years. And so particularly in the K-5 realm, you've probably heard before that we have 27 or 28 second graders. So we've split the second grade into two. We have 29 sixth graders. So in any case, the idea is to add a math-focused AST person. I'd call it a math specialist. Tina and I have spoken about this at some length, looked at the data, and saw a real need for some additional, what we would refer to as Tier 2 math support for the kids. So that's, I'm assuming that part of the cost of that will be offset by Title I funding, but that's always a guessing game until we finally determine how much money we actually get, which usually happens around the first or second week of July, sometimes later. And the only other thing really is just an expansion of our restorative practices, professional development work. We have been working with Mel Motel and her crew, and they've been fabulous, but they need to eat, they need to be paid. So we had a set amount of professional development funds that we were able to access for that. It's under the coaching line budget for professional development, and we'd like to beef that up for next year. It won't be a terrible amount, but we need to be looking at probably another $3,000 or $4,000 for that for next year, so that we can have them in on a more regular basis, not only to work with faculty, but to work with kids. And in some cases, they've actually worked with a couple of parents to help them in terms of their relationship with their kids and with school, et cetera. So it's been terrific. So we'd like to continue that important work. Those are really the main things from us. Capital plan we could talk about next time, I guess. But any questions about that?
What was it you said you worked with for the restorative practices?
Mel Motel. Yeah.
Okay, next will be Dummerston. Yeah.
So, a big focus, I think, this year at Dummerston School, and this is really reflected in our continuous improvement plan, is really this idea of social, emotional, and academic learning, and really understanding how children learn through engagement, and creating systems within our schools that really support the authentic engagement of students. And so, thinking about all the work we've been doing around creating an effective MTSS system, we're really thinking about what work do we really still need to be doing to improve our instruction. One of the things we've been talking about in our leadership team in terms of PD is looking at doing a school-wide training and possibly collaborating with Guilford Central School on a really strong research-based program such as developmental designs or responsive classroom, so that we're really creating learning environments that kind of hit the sweet spot in terms of how students are learning and how students also become active in self-assessing and kind of identifying their pathway forward in their learning. So we're very excited about that as a potential opportunity. We're also, as Herb mentioned, looking at where, we might make some changes and shift some things around. We are looking at the possibility of increasing our school counselor to a full-time position. What I'm finding as a new principal is that our school counselor is, she's really part of our teaching staff. She's actually in classrooms for a significant part of her day, doing direct instruction around social emotional learning, using research-based curricula. She does zones of regulation, second step. She's also oversees our EST process and coordinates our middle school asset team. She's working with a very wide range of students from pre-K to 8. We added the pre-K this year, so we have, we have a really diverse need in our school in terms of the families who are coming in and the developmental age of their children, and all of those parents need different types of support. So we're looking at that. In terms of curriculum, this year we're also evaluating our Tier 1 literacy program. For years, Dummerston has used a program called Open Court, and we're looking at the effectiveness of that program and whether it would make sense to shift or to renew our commitment to Open Court, because the materials are actually falling. they're crumbling right before our eyes, so we do need to make a decision in that regard. This year's our first year with our pre-K, and so we still have an investment to make around our early learning center. This is, this was our first year out of the gate and a real chance to see how the space worked and how the program worked, and so we have some additional investments to make in order to really refine that program and provide adequate facilities and space for all the children who are enrolled. And then, finally, I'll just say we're also looking at the idea of possibly at least a part-time night custodian. I believe Dummerston School is the only school that doesn't have that type of staffing, and the reason, one of the big concerns without having that staffing is really around the security of the building and use of the building at night, and having events taking place at night without a certified, without a licensed staff member is somewhat of a security concern. So that's something else that we'd like to take a look at in terms of our shifting.
Jody Normandeau, Dummerston. Any chance of increasing our pre-K? Because I know we started out with just a minimum of 10 kids.
Right. Yes. We're looking at increasing enrollment in the pre-K. We needed to actually really dedicate a para to the pre-K. This year, there are 10 students, but we found, and I think the other principals would agree, we really needed a para to support that program. And so with that para, then that means that we can actually increase enrollment, up to 15.
Thank you.
Moving on south to Brattleboro, we'll start with Academy.
So a lot of Academy's plans are wrapped up in the capital plan, which you'll hear more about going forward. But locally, I'm pretty confident I can present a level funded budget. As Herb said, we tend to move things around as we need them. So this year we added some technology money to replace some interactive whiteboards that were no longer working. Things like that can shift over to some of the initiatives that we have going right now. You've heard John speak about restorative justice. We'd like to keep investing in that. We've also been working with Mel Motel and Amelia in the high school. It's been phenomenal. What we're seeing our kids do is really high-level work. So we really want to continue that. Our behavior referrals are down because of it. Behavior is changing. So we'd like to invest some of our funds into paying people like Mel or Scott Kaltenbaugh to come consult with us and help train kids and staff. We also, you're familiar, some of you, with our nurse's office numbers. They're very high. It's a very busy place, and we currently have a full-time nurse and a half-time nurse para. The half-time nurse para can be anybody. They're not a certified, they don't have to be a certified nurse. So I'd like to make that be a half-time RN, just to add a level of medical knowledge to that position. We have some complicated student medical needs that I would feel comfortable having another RN in the building, because if our full-time nurse is out, it can be worrisome. So that would be the biggest, probably, staff shift. Other than that, we're going to be looking at our use of academic support teachers and special educators and thinking about how we can best utilize them to make sure we're doing the best to, have our universal instruction meet the needs of all kids. That might mean specializing per content area. We've talked about that in the past, wondering with our current staff if that would work better, because we have a lot of kids who need services. So things like that, but no big purchases. We're done with Reading Street. We bought that a couple of years ago. So that's pretty much it.
And I should have introduced Kelly and John. They have board members. Kelly and John. Okay, we'll come a little further east. Mark Spino, Green Street.
Okay. Over the past 6 years, Green Street School has transformed quite a bit, and the budget has supported that, which has been sensational. I put together a resource pamphlet just to give the board a greater understanding of all of the different programs we've built over the last 6 years and that we have in place to support kids. So it's a pretty comprehensive pamphlet. I'll give that to you. And for the public watching, it's on our website as well. So for the budget this year, we have some capital projects that we've identified to help support this building and supporting our students, but we'll get into that at a later time. In terms of programming, very much, pretty much a level funded budget I'm looking at this point, with a minimal addition. We currently staff our front office with an admin assistant, and then a part-time para who supports the office for about 3.5 hours per day. With the increasing needs of our school community, it's really become, we're not able to meet the needs the way we want to meet them right now in terms of students, staff, parents, delivery personnel coming in and out of the building. For Miss Mo to be representing the school and also doing her business of paying the bills, it's become very much overwhelming. So I'd like to add, essentially it's a 0.6 para educator position, which would enable us to relieve some pressure on the school office, and it would also help with the nurse's office. We're a 2-strand school, about 230 kids, lots of needs. And this is actually something I would like to explore in the new year, but then support it next year in our budget as well. But I have some ideas that I'm going to speak with Frank about and see if it's doable. I've definitely identified it as a necessary support that we need to meet the needs of our community right now. Aside from that, I have a 0.8 AST position, so a teacher who works 4 days a week. I'll be exploring through Title I with Paul whether there's a possibility of going to full-time. I don't know that there is, but that's something to be exploring. Any questions? Thanks.
One thing I think for Kelly too, I want to think about an EST trained people for those positions rather than nurses. Not that, nurses aren't adequately trained or aren't, not that there's an advantage to it, but a lot of the really emergencies, if something really bad happens, even the nurses are going to call 911.
Yeah.
So it might be a little bit less expensive, but appropriate amount of.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And what I'm finding, what we need is time for my admin assistant to be able to do the business of the school. And there's so much like public relations and meeting with people, and she's phenomenal at that. Also means she's here until 6 o'clock at night, most nights, and it's not really okay at this point.
We'll go to Mary Kaufman at Oak Grove.
So again, a pretty level funded budget I'm looking at this year. One possible programmatic change would be a staffing change, would be cost neutral, but would have the potential of increasing some support around literacy for most likely some of our upper grade students, also lower grade if necessary. We want to continue building on the supports that we currently have in classrooms, but also working to find ways to support teachers around meeting the needs that we're currently seeing in classrooms of our students. I started this year off, as the rest of the district did, really focusing on Tier 1, which is whole class instruction and behavior. And my staff is really going gung-ho with that, and we're working really hard about supporting all of our kids in the classroom all the time, as much as we can, I should say. But we do need some support around that, and I know it's something that probably most of our teachers are looking for, so that is an area that I'd like to research and focus on. Again, that goes along with building on the current MTSS model that we have, just restructuring that a little bit in areas where it needs that, but no major money spending there. One other area I would like to increase would be after school opportunities. I'm working with our after school coordinator right now to identify some new opportunities. We do have a fairly small staff compared to some other schools, and so finding staff members to do that is a challenge. I have an active PTO that would love to have some community members come in to do some of that work. So we are looking at ways of offering more opportunities. And we may have to build that up into next year's budget. In terms of building, we have some basic needs for increasing some security around the building. Small projects, but necessary. And then thinking long-term, we have some goals of possibly moving the main office, which currently is located in a place that is ADA compliant. However, it's not very ADA friendly. So looking at ways to be a little more inclusive and community friendly would also help with security of the building. And finally, last year, I believe, we had a woman come in to do a playground plan for us at Oak Grove. We have just received a copy of the master plan that came via email yesterday, and we should be getting the actual hard copy of that in the mail. So we are always looking to add to the playground some more natural aspects right now. So that is a long-term project, but we'll do that in little bits as we can.
So just one question, so it's an after-school coordinator, is that for your school or for the district? I never heard of that before.
It's our school, after-school program.
Okay. I think all the schools in Brattleboro have that at least.
Yes.
Any other questions? Well, Mary's sitting there. Mary's just, we're happy to have Mary. We always are happy to have her in with us, but she isn't going to be contributing to this budget. She's got her own. But Mary Ross is with us this evening. And then the furthest south end of WSESD is John Gagnon.
And I'll stand because, like Guilford, we're kind of off to the side a little bit, which we don't mind at all. So for Guilford, thinking about next year and programming needs, really building on our continuous improvement plan, which has three main focuses. One would be with our MTSS system, and with that I do have a staffing request to increase our regular ed pairs by one. We have very few regular ed pairs in our building. We have 1.7 in our pre-K, and we have one full-time para in our kindergarten currently. I'm asking for an additional regular ed para that would be splitting their time between our first and second grade. Many of our sister schools have that type of support in their very earliest grades, and I believe it would create a more robust system of support for our very young students. So that is a staffing request that I have. The other request that I have is programming, and that is around staff development. We are committed to a nature-based, outdoor-based learning program. We've done tremendous work. We have a very close relationship with Bonneville Environmental Education Center. And we have, over the last 2 years, through grant money and through looking for funds here, there, and everywhere, been able to piece together some very good PD for my pre-K and my K, and currently for my first grade teacher. I am asking for a school improvement PD line item that would include $5,000 to $7,000 for continuing that type of work with Beak and getting training for my second grade teacher and perhaps even my third grade teacher, depending on the amount of money that was added to that line item. We are committed to outdoor nature-based education. And then finally, I'd like to add, Marion mentioned Guilford and Dummerston jointly doing PD in either developmental designs or responsive classroom. And that ties into our community continuous improvement plan in the sense of building a positive learning environment that is open and inclusive to all our students. Julianne spoke about the engagement piece that developmental designs and responsive classroom is known for, but it's also known for increasing cultural sensitivity, inclusivity, building that positive learning environment that we are striving for. And also, like that has been spoken about, it focuses on the self-regulation skills that our children desperately need. It's part of strengthening core Tier 1 instruction around social emotional learning, which has a direct correlation to increased student achievement. So those are the requests for Guilford School this year.
Any questions?
John, did you notice the improvements on Bonneville Road? It's going to be a lot easier to get to Butte now.
It will be, yes.
That was a grant just for you.
So I think that's all the elementary principals. When we get to the other executive session, some of the special ed directors will be joining us.
Well, that's now, isn't it?
That's now.
Yeah, okay, all right. Making sure I was on board here. So departing from our normal practice of putting our executive sessions at the end of the evening, out of respect to all of the principals and administrators gathered here, we're going to have a small executive session now under Title I, 313A7 to discuss the academic records, suspension or discipline of students. We are going to recess to that room.
Sure.
I would entertain a motion to enter into executive session.
So moved.
Thank you, Ann. All those in favor of moving into executive session, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays or abstentions? The ayes have it. The ayes have it. You may talk amongst yourselves. Let us rise to executive session at 7:18. Moving on. As we rise from executive session to unfinished business, we have some policy approvals. And if I had been thinking, it'd be great to know who's attending beforehand from the student council. You like shoot me an email so I can take it. It'd be lovely to hear from students on some of these policies when we're reviewing them, especially when, you know, like tobacco policy or student safety discussion would be really lovely. I'm like madly seeing if I had either of your emails in my computer. Send them to you now, but I didn't. But it'd be really fun to, you know, get student input on these policies when we're doing a first read and get their opinion. We're on unfinished business A policies.
Okay, thank you.
Public participation, tobacco, student freedom of expression, and leadership councils. Shall we do them one at a time or as a slate? Slate? All those in favor, because these have been for a first read, all those in favor of approving policy 3 feet, C3, public participation in board meetings.
Have you changed it since the last time?
No.
Okay, thank you.
E8, tobacco, F36, student freedom of expression, and H7, leadership councils. Please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays or abstentions? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it.
I would just like to say maybe to the student council that there is a sentence or two in there that in the tobacco that also deals with vaping. So it might be interesting for you just to take a look at that.
Where will we find? So if you go to the WSESU website, and Paul Smith will be your technology consultant for that. Next up, I think we're actually going to talk about the VSBA dues, because I have a big orange past due. People are,
The bill?
that's the bill. For $9,962. I think it might make sense to move up as part of this discussion, my VSBA annual meeting update, which is under negotiations because it sort of belongs with this discussion. So maybe I could just give people just a quick overview of what's, you know, there's a new year, new board, new leadership at the VSBA, and that may inform people's opinion about this. And I will say that I also have a duty of care oath that I have had to take as a member of the VSBA, so I feel that I am conflicted in this vote because I can do nothing that would harm the organization, and I think not voting against $10,000 being sent to the VSBA would violate that oath, in my opinion, or certainly be an appearance of a conflict of interest if I voted for it, because I really am conflicted. So that's how I view the conflict, and I feel that I could not vote against it because of that. Yes, Jody Romero.
They really make you take an oath?
A duty of care that you will do nothing that would harm the organization. So, yeah.
They're taking away your rights.
Well,
could we be germane to this?
So I will update. So Nicole Mace has stepped down officially, and Sue Siglowski, who I think many people know from, actually, maybe a few people know from working on the superintendent evaluation process that we went through. She was the former legal and policy administrator, I don't know the word to say, like coordinator for the VSBA. She has, we did a full search. We had external candidates. I think we had 9 to start. There were 3 candidates that were interviewed by the full board. And the internal candidate, Sue Siglowski, who's an internal candidate, rose to the position of being the new executive director. So we are now filling the position of the legal policy analyst. So Sue is wearing 2 hats. She was a longtime board member in the Bennington kind of area, school board member, been in the legal policy position for about 4 years at the VSBA. She's excellent. I think she'll make an excellent leader. And I think it's worth saying that it is going to be a different kind of leadership style than Nicole, and more, I think the board had a lot of discussions about moving the VSBA from a controversial legislative lobbyist group to an organization that is more inclusive of all the boards and more internally focused on supporting boards, which I can honestly say, without any conflict, is a really good direction for the VSBA to go in. And there's been a lot of soul-searching discussion, and I think there's a really positive feeling now. And Sue Siglowski is a good person to lead a different-looking board that is less controversial amongst school boards. And I think a lot of school boards have chosen to not pay their dues. And because they were upset with the fact that the VSBA was not supporting their school board's needs and desires to the legislature. And a lot of those, and I have to say, a lot of those votes were very close votes. So in terms of the legislative action, we have therefore a new executive board. Neil O'Dell is the chair. Don Collins, who has been on the VSBA for a really long time. He was superintendent in various districts in Vermont. He brings a lot of experience and a super classy guy who never angers anybody in a board meeting, but he can say some pointed things. So I've got to learn how to do that for my next decade of work. But I think it's going to be a very different looking executive board in addition to a very different executive director. I am, however, sad to report that I could not get the PreK language adjustment on the resolutions. I was 1 vote shy of getting the, if you can all recollect, there was a request that came from Vernon that we unstrike a strike through regarding PreK. And I was not successful in getting that unstruck because everything was being moved to the slate. It was very difficult. I did get really close, but 1 vote shy. That's not from the board. That is from all this SU, all the SU representatives statewide. So, and it was not that districts, the people that spoke against our position said it was not that they did not want to support PreK. It was that PreK has a lot of support through lobbying in the legislature, through Building Bright Futures. They're quite well organized, and the meager resources of the VSBA should not be expended supporting private PreK because they have their own lobbying organizations. And that was primarily the reasoning that I think I was not successful with that. So, it's a new, it is somewhat of a new era at the VSBA. I continue to work to keep that motion going in a more inclusive of all school boards direction, as one of the Windham County representatives, as does Dan MacArthur. So.
Should there be a motion at this time?
That would be a great time to have a
I
motion.
would like to make a motion that the WSESD board pay the dues of $9,962 to the Vermont School Board Association for the 2019-2020 dues.
Seconded.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Tim. Any discussion?
Yeah, I would like to say that I'm in favor of this motion, and the reason is I get a lot of personal feedback. I was on the Planning and Policy Committee for the District 6 for years. All of those policies come vetted from the school board. If you have personal questions, call up. You can talk to Nicole in the past, and now you can talk to Sue. I talked with her today, and she's very generous of her time, and has, it's like, the answers. So I think that we get a lot of value. And also, I'd like to, if I could, include what Frank said at the meeting on Monday about help that we got from the Vermont School Board Association that actually had a monetary value, which I don't remember exactly what the details were, but and whether that was executive session, I don't remember that either.
Yeah, it spoke to the issue that I had referred to, and it was a concern across the state in public schools, particularly for school boards and budgeting, and it related to the issue of the Secretary of Education changing the method in which they would consider eligible costs for reimbursing special ed services. In the position the Secretary took, which was totally unannounced and only like 4 days before the new fiscal year took effect, it was in late June, essentially was saying that they were going to disallow, he didn't have a specific number, but the inference was somewhere around $50,000 from any of the extraordinary aid and or placements that were made for special education students. So we have many of those types of placements at the Brattleboro Retreat or Kendall Farm or a number of independent schools. It was basically saying we're going to impose a regular ed portion of the service that comes back to the district in terms of the bill, and we are going to exempt that from this special ed aid. Well, the VSBA, the implication there was potentially $500,000, potentially $750,000 of lost revenue, you know, and for us, it's simply a cost shift right onto the tax rate. So it was VSBA, along with the VSA, Vermont Superintendents Association, Vermont School Boards Association, along with the Special Ed Directors Association, the VASBO, Vermont Association of School Business Officials, which I'm part of, got together, engaged folks in Washington, D.C. to review the federal regulations around special education services, and to what extent was the Secretary's action potentially restricting free and appropriate access to public education. And it was really the VSBA that led that charge. And just last Friday, well, November 6th, the Secretary rescinded that position. And so it's a very different, landscape now. And that, as I say, is hundreds of thousands of dollars for us and across the state. So that would be one example of a very significant value that your representative on board has accomplished.
Yes, Dave.
Actually, that's a good example of a situation where the VSBA played a lead role, but the effort was coming from across the state, and it would have, what happened would have happened regardless of whether the VSBA or anybody else had taken that up. It was clearly a major mistake, and it was getting a lot of attention. The legislature was already aware of that, and I think the response of the Secretary was from a lawsuit, if I'm not correct.
It was initiated by
well, we can say that the VSBA initiated it. It was the whole series of organizations that represent education are concerned about, but also then a lot of legislative support. So that was something that the VSBA played a big role, but it wasn't necessarily crucial, or it wouldn't, if they didn't play it, or if they were limited in what they did, it wouldn't necessarily not have happened. I think the things that have happened are the things that I'd like to point out to argue against paying these dues. One is that, as Christina just demonstrated, this is a private special interest lobbying organization primarily. And they provide services to school districts. They do help develop policies. And if you look at some of the most recent ones, you could have found most of that language around bullying and things like that. You would have found most of that language in the line. It's a helpful service, but it doesn't necessarily, it's not something that can't be replaced. They operate in a manner that undervalues the voices of smaller school boards and school districts. They have their own oath, their own limit on any kind of criticism coming from the board. But some of the things that have happened over the years, one is healthcare, which is a really big one. Right now, there's arbitration going on that, to settle between the union and some of the organizations that Frank mentioned, who were appointed by or directed by the legislature, maybe it was the governor, I'm not sure exactly, but they were put in a position to determine what the health care should be for all the teachers across the state. And that takes us, the local school boards, out of that calculation. And it's very likely that the settlement, we don't know what the settlement's going to be, but it's an arbitrator, so you can get a general idea. But because we're no longer going to be negotiating with our teachers, whatever it is, if they have to pay a lot more, they're going to want us to make that up in their salaries, because for years they have negotiated lower salaries in order to protect that health care. And the VSBA lobbied vigorously to take that power away from school boards. And they did it because that was in the interest of the larger communities that aren't as, well, like, it's hard to say this with any certainty, but it seems to me they're not as concerned with the relationships with their staff as communities like ours are. But they lobbied vigorously for that, and if they had gone the other way, it's unlikely that would have happened. The other thing is, Christina mentioned the PreK, and the process you described in the soul-searching conversations. I was, before Christina was the Windham County rep, I was for 5 years the Windham County rep, and there were lots of conversations like that around all sorts of topics and all sorts of issues. But invariably, the majority of the board, and then at the conventions, the majority of the representatives from the more populated areas prevail. And things like recognizing the importance of just the symbolic commitment to supporting local private pre-K and putting kids in front of the political considerations it's another example of how this is a self-interested lobbying group. They're not representing the communities, or certainly not our community. And this is a really good example. And the fact that there are, when this first came up, the head of the Superintendent's Association came into the board meeting and argued very vigorously for us for the board to support his position on what should happen with the pre-K funding. And it was really, and he made a really strong point of excluding I think he described them as advocates, and building bright futures, and let's grow kids. And it was described in a way that they're enemies rather than that they're somehow they have the same goals that we do. They just happen to be private. And that was the point where I realized that I was in the wrong group, that I couldn't continue to function on that board. The other thing that's happened recently is, and it's why we're here right now struggling with all of these issues and meeting several times a week for hours and hours and hours, is that the VSBA lobbied vigorously under states the effort that they put in to convince the legislature to not delay the forced mergers beyond the July deadline that the legislature had set. There was a bill that was 1 or 2 votes short in the House of passing, and the VSBA absolutely opposed that, absolutely opposed any delay so that we could build these structures and reform the system as a merged system and still run the districts for a year or 6 months or for any length of time. They wouldn't consider any length of time. They actually called the people that chose to not convene the first transition board meeting, which was the majority of the people in the room, was a lot of people, of civil disobedience for wanting to wait until the court had ruled on the lawsuit. And that was the vice president of the organization that said that to the Senate Ed Committee. They just really turned their back on our specific needs of the smaller communities in order to meet the political agenda of the people that they actually, that they carefully cultivate relationships with. And their interest is not the same as ours. So there are all of those things. Plus, with the change in Act 46, there are fewer school boards now, so they had to restructure the dues system. And and I was on the board when this happened as well, and was part of this process. They recognize that gradually they're going to have to become a fee-for-service organization, that they're going to be collecting less dues over time, and that gradually they're going to become basically a private fee-for-service organization. And that's already started. Their quarterly newsletters has a chart of the costs, and we actually last week approved a check for $200 to the VSBA to access their negotiations and contracts database. Because we have to, any services that we're going to use, we have to pay for them. They no longer just, well, they still provide plenty of things that, people, Sean had mentioned, that are of value, no question about it. But if we need their services, we can still get them. And the price that anybody pays for anything is, or the cost of anything is what the people buying it are willing to pay. So I think that they could say they're going to charge a lot more if you're not a member. Maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't. But if they charge too much more, we would find somebody else to provide the services. I think the other thing that's really specific to this board right now is that we now have an additional cost in the superintendent search, which I suspect we're going to want to search widely for, which would require hiring some professionals. We also have additional legal expenses well beyond what we anticipated in the budget, because we didn't have any idea of the kinds of things. I think we're well past what we budgeted for legal costs. And I would suspect a long way to go. And that $9,000, I think, could be much better used to cover the needs of the district. I think, which one was it? But one of the budgets that the SU looked at the other night, there was an additional, the number wasn't firm, but there was an additional $18,000 to increase the expenditures on experts to come in and do restorative justice training with staff. And to me, that's so much more valuable for what we need right now, particularly what the board just heard. I think it's just way more important for us to look at our needs and the specific things that we need to be doing and just let this go. If we need the services of the VSBA, we can pay for them as we need them and keep that $9,000 here and not support an organization that has consistently worked against our interests and the interests of the smaller school boards, the school districts around the state. So that's my pitch.
The other, I will, as a point of clarification, the fee service is different if you are, you're not a member, so it's,
sure it is.
We have not, we talked about this Monday night. I don't know what I've been doing with my time, but I have not done a full evaluation of kind of what we think we might use and what the cost differential would be for this, for the membership.
And 2 questions, and for anybody, I guess, that knows. It seems like there's lots of vacant seats online when I look at the VSBA. So is it that many people are pulling out, or it's a re-election year and they're just not listing people?
So a couple of things. There have been a few seats because people did not pay their dues. They do not have, the representative cannot be from that district. So some of those, so if we didn't pay our dues, I could no longer be a representative. I think I can serve out my term, actually. I think if we don't pay our dues, I still serve my term. I think that's in the bylaws. But if we hadn't paid last year, I would be done if we didn't pay this year. So that would that would, could affect if we want to have an advocate there next year. And then they've redone all the regions because of Act 46. Some things didn't make sense, like people were in region, they were merged into two supervisory unions, so they went through a whole redistricting this year and changed the number of districts, and so they haven't had a chance to go through. So what happened in June when when is that meeting, Did? Is that June?
Which one?
When the regional meeting, when you...
Oh, no, that was September.
Gosh.
Yeah.
2 months
It's
ago.
always on.
So in September, they've gone through redistricting, so they haven't had a chance to fill those seats.
So the other questions I have are, so David, you had said, the VSBA might not have acted in our interest in certain cases, and you elaborated upon that. But my question is like, when I look on the website of the VSBA, like the VSBA is us, right? I mean, like it's all of the regions. So are you suggesting that the board of directors of the VSBA kind of usurps a lot of power and then pushes their own political views? Or I don't understand.
No, I think it's the way the membership is. They're trying to be proportional. I mean, it's not exactly proportional, but they try to have the same number of people in each of the regions, and they have 2 representatives. And at the convention, now I think it's each SU or SD has 1 representative. There used to be a lot more people. So they try to be proportional. But most of the population of Vermont is in Chittenden County. And those are much larger school districts. Some of them were already, like Burlington and South Burlington were already merged districts. And they're much larger, and they have more votes. And their interests, and particularly on the board, their interests they're different than us. I don't know how else to say it. And they tend to dominate.
Any other board?
I'm just wondering is that fees for what, is it for upcoming, or is it something that we would already have made some use of their services? And it's
for this school year, so we would have already used some of the services this year.
I don't think we had used any services.
I've had a couple
conversations
today, in fact.
Wasn't the pamphlet that you handed out, wasn't that a Vermont School Board Association pamphlet?
yes,
Yeah,
the booklet.
yeah.
Yeah, that's an annual.
Do we have to pay for that? Or is it?
We do.
Oh, yeah. So you could get that whether you were a member of the Vermont School Board?
I don't think so, because I had asked, you remember Wendy Cohen came, and she had looked at one, and they would not allow her to take it with her when she was coming to work with us, because she's not a board member.
If we didn't have representatives there, would we further marginalize ourselves though? Because if it's proportional and if all the small towns pull out there in the south, then decisions would just be made that would be even less proportional, right?
I think, well, technically, yeah. I mean, this part of the state would be less represented, but it doesn't matter in the votes because they don't go our way. They typically don't go our way.
So I have a question for you, Christine. So do you know if there are other areas of the state that are feeling the same way? And is there any way of those representatives like meeting and discussing how they want to vote or act on things? Or, I mean, is there any sort of action like that?
So not particularly. I think when Windham Northeast pulled out, Westminster, that area pulled out. Nicole asked Dan and I to meet several times to try to talk with them. It snowed every time she was trying to come down, and so we didn't get a chance to go kind of make a pitch to kind of hear from them. I know Washington Central pulled out as well, and that was a tie vote that did not pass to pay the dues. And I think that because the representative from that region happened to sit on the Washington Central Board, she was bringing the information back and forth.
Do you think this new person might influence them to rejoin, or, I mean?
I think that there's going to be I think that has been one of the criteria that the board put in front of the new director for a significant challenge, because there's been several other districts that are up in the air about paying and concerned. And so I know that it's been a significant consideration on the board that we try to repair damage that's been done, try to reach out and try to have a different profile going forward with all the boards, because this is our Vermont League of Cities and Towns. So we really, the board has said that, and that is, we didn't have a formal motion on that, but that was very clear in the direction for the new executive director. Any other board thoughts?
Well, I have another question. I don't know if it's germane or not. And that would be, is this $10,000, would it be added to the cap, or does it come into the cap at all?
The school district budgeted, remember how this budget, fiscal year 20 came together, it was every individual board budgeted, and that went to town meeting and that got passed. And then we had our June 25th meeting and the aggregate of all of that got passed. So the dues and fees for VSBA dues, when they were all put together in the legacy budgets, and now what is now in the current budget, $17,000. And then nothing's been charged against that account, of course, because you haven't paid the dues. So you're looking like you're going to have a favorable variance against the budget based on how the legacy budget's anticipated dues versus the new fee. So the answer is that it was anticipated as part of setting the tax rate, and it looks like if you move forward with this, if you pay this, and you look to budget next year for it, you'll probably see a reduction in your budget in that line item. The other area that is in the board, this SD board's budget, is general professional services and legal. That budget's $28,000. You've spent $2,500 year to date, so you're well under the threshold of the budget line item. And most of the spending in that right now, that $2,500 is the filming cost.
I think though the short answer to your question is if we don't spend it, it becomes surplus. And then we can use it because we haven't spent it. So we'll have it for next year.
I have one more, just food for thought. This is a Windham Southeast Supervisory Union VSBA dues. So the question would remain, if Vernon wanted to remain a part of it and WSESD didn't, how that would look, because they changed their dues assessment process a couple, like maybe 2 years ago, was that, Frank, or so?
I think it was, yeah.
So,
There isn't a separate one for the SD and then for the SD?
no, it used to be all separate, but now.
Well, I thought that's the way when the due structure changed, they were going to do SDs and SUs.
So they do it.
Probably just they lumped it together.
Yeah, and it's now like a per head basis because of all the changes in Act 46. They've changed the whole due structure.
Can I see this statement?
Sure. Is there any other board comments right now? Like the public has some input. So I've seen Jody's hand up for a while. Jody?
I just want to agree with absolutely everything that David said. Since Act 46 has started, I've been very much aware of what the VSBA has been doing along with the Vermont Principals Association, et cetera. I have watched the person go to the legislature and testify against what the VSBA board has asked her to testify against. I've seen the clickiness up there in Montpelier, very much clickiness of this organization and how that they do not represent the smaller districts, to the point that there was another organization that was set up in our local area to compete with the VSBA, and I don't know where that's headed right now, but they have not been in our favor. And also the fact that I agree that you can pay for the services. David mentioned 9,000, but I think it's 9,900, which is very close to 10,000. But I would encourage the board to really think about the possibility of getting out and using that money elsewhere, because they aren't. You watch when you go to the legislature and you go up to the north and you watch and see what happens, and you see what happens in the Chittenden County, etc. And that's the engine that runs the state. We are considered Massachusetts down here, or the banana belt. So think very carefully before spending that money there.
Christina?
Yes.
After looking at the invoice, you were correct. It is the WSESU, so maybe I should withdraw the motion, since it isn't.
We still have to decide in order to know what to vote with the SU meeting. Because we're one board.
I see. Okay. I will not restore it.
Because the SU needs to be reimbursed by the SD from that line up.
Yeah.
Tara.
Tara Cassine from Putney, sorry. I fully agree with what David Schulz has indicated on the past history of the VSBA votes and the way that they are operating. In searching just the website at the moment, I did note that they do have superintendent search help, guidance, and some things that they can help in our search for replacement. So when you are looking at not paying $9,000, what does that mean in terms of added services like help in guidance, budgets, reviews, bringing people down here, screenings that they would offer for the search for a new superintendent? And I don't know what those costs would equal doing it by themselves, or if there's a fee for doing it with them. But if it was part of the $9,000, it might be worth just reviewing it for that purpose alone. Thank you.
I can answer that question. Because I found the minutes of the meeting where we approved the fee for service. The superintendent search now, the school board member rate is $8,500. The school board member non-rate is $12,000. So if we just chose to use their services, I mean, that is the question.
And then we'd have to establish whether it's a valuable service at 8 or 12,000. But if we pay $10,000 in dues and then $8,000 for that service, we're actually paying $17,000 for that service instead of 12.
100% agree. I just wanted to make sure that it was out in the world.
I will forward these minutes to the board that include the service, just for everybody's light reading on a weekend. Thank you, student council representatives. Sorry it wasn't more riveting and student oriented. I'll rethink our agendas next time.
I'll be in touch.
Donna brought up a good point. So are there other services, people who've been on the board before, that we would be wanting this year, or maybe voting upon? We might not want their help with the superintendent search, but that were typical in the past, things that people can predict are coming up.
And are there other organizations we could contact?
Like, are there other,
other services?
Yeah, other services that like we've utilized in the past that we've
Well, all the informational, educational things about being a board member, and the policies, all the policies are come down through the VSBA. So they've all been vetted and, they've had legal expertise look at them. I mean, we definitely get items that if we weren't members, we wouldn't get. I don't know what the whole quantity of them is.
I think it'd be hard to take a stab at that. I mean, I think Sean spoke to it, one of the values is being able to pick up the phone and call, and that service is not available in a fee for service, so you would have to go to an attorney.
Or the agency,
Or the agent.
which is free.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Couldn't hear what you were saying.
I have the fee for service in front of me, and one of the services that's not available is to be able to pick up the phone and get legal advice or policy advice.
Well, you can't get legal advice from VSBA.
They will give you legal advice.
Yeah, but they are very careful to say this is
Yeah.
not legal advice.
Right.
Yeah.
But the AOE does the same thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you get it from the
exactly.
area.
Yeah. But the AOE is in charge.
Yes.
So it seems like there are really two different components to this question of whether we should pay this bill and stay a part of this organization. And the one is the financial. Is it better for us to stay or not to stay? And whether and the other part is whether we agree with their philosophy and how they're going about doing things. And I am happy that David mentioned a couple of the things that they have done in the past, because I had forgotten about their push towards the merger process, and I particularly did not appreciate that. However, hearing that there's a little bit of maybe some change in the way that it may be run and the focus, I'm wondering if maybe we can, if you're going to send these minutes to us, is there a possibility that we can table this and review this information a little and be better informed? Because I'm personally kind of conflicted about it.
We could have a motion there. We could put a motion to table on it.
So to respond to that, again, this is from 3 years ago or 2 years ago, in the previous 5 years, but there's an inertia in Montpelier. It's sort of an institutional inertia that even though the board is responding because people aren't paying their dues because they're upset with some of the things that they did, so they're trying to correct that. But my experience is that that inertia will not be overcome. That won't change. And it's not just the board and the staff. They're in the building with the Superintendent's Association and the Principals Association. That's a constant pressure on the VSBA staff and leadership. And it's part of the Montpelier milieu that they may be able to make some changes, they may be able to alter things, but when it comes down to serious policy discussions and serious political discussions, that's not going to change.
So
We still won't.
is there an alternative other than just choosing not to be a part of it? And, I mean, is there an alternative organization? Is there,
Not really, some of the things that Sean mentioned, like providing policies. Well, the Superintendent's Association generally participates in developing those policies, so that might be an alternative, certainly. But typically, if we know that we need a policy or if a law changes, we would know that without the VSBA. And again, most policies, you can find sample policies for pretty much anything you want. We just did it with the dogs, for instance. And it was another school district's policy that we learned from. So it's really, is the value, is providing that the symbolic support and the fiscal support worth, that message worth what we get, from the membership. We're going to pay for any services anyway, and why pay $10,000 in dues and really get maybe a couple of policies, but probably not. And some of the policies are we'll see as we go through, are pretty shoddily done. There are questions about the legal sites that, that's a new, let the other conversation. But it's really a question, is it worth it to endorse an organization that has misrepresented us for the little bit of support that we get.
Two things. First of all, I think that the Board of Dummerston was thinking of not paying their dues to begin with. Second of all, you can watch these VSBA meetings. At least I can watch some of them. I think they're all filmed. They're all taped so that you can watch them online. And it might be a good education to take a look at that.
I support what David has said, and they were right up there in Montpelier pounding to force merge people on more than one occasion. The other thing is that Burlington, Chittenden County is still going to outweigh us regardless of leadership. They think completely differently than we do. They're very city-oriented. They appear to know nothing about rural Vermont. And it was really disheartening to be up there and hear the things that they were saying, because I was up there a lot, more than I wanted to be. So whether you stay or you leave, you're still not going to get the kind of representation you want. Chittenden County is still going to rule the roost. And it sounds like, you know, you're going to pay those dues, and then you're going to pay them more money for help with the superintendent. So why? And what's the price difference, Christina, between a member and a non-member for a superintendent help?
$8,500 for the school member rate and $12,000 for the non-school member.
So we still say money. We didn't pay them, but they haven't earned it. They have not earned. They haven't earned it.
I really want to move on from this because we still have a lot of things that I think this would work a big discussion. So if somebody wants to throw a motion to table yet again, we can. It's going to probably give Frank a heart attack to not pay a bill in 60 days.
No.
But it'll be personal growth for everyone here. So if somebody wants
Robert's rules, tabling something like this?
Majority. So we have a motion to table. Is there a second on that motion?
Second.
All those in favor of the motion to table, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays or abstentions? I
Nay.
abstain.
I think we need a hand vote.
1, 2, 3. And you were nay. So the motion to table does not pass. We are 1, 2, 3. So the motion does not pass. So
Sorry, which one of the three did you say?
I was an abstention. It's funny, I
So
emailed
the
the
3 nays
VSBA.
and there are 4 yeas, that's the majority. Oh, well, no.
Can you do that? Sure. All those in favor of the motion to table, please raise your hand.
I'm going to change my, now that we get to
Wait a
revote, I
minute.
changed my vote.
Oh, geez, don't mess with me after 8 o'clock, dude. Okay, cheapers. I need you a copy and everything. So the motion to table does not carry. I don't even need to do fancy math about extensions. So we have a motion on the floor to pay the VSBA dues. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor of the motion to pay the $9,962 invoice for the VSBA dues, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nay?
Nay.
And I abstain. So it looks like we are not paying the invoice. I will send around this cost, and we can consider for next year too. Moving on.
Is there anything else with budget?
Oh, Frank, yeah. You waited that long for $10,000 and a $50 million budget. Kind of funny.
Can I say something that is sort of connected?
Sure, go for it.
There's been a lot of talk about Chittenden County and the big bad bunch up there. My son lives in Winooski, and Winooski has the most diverse population of any population in the state of Vermont. And their school board, which actually Nicole Mace was on, Nicole Mace was on their board.
She's on the select board.
But no, she's on the school board also. She isn't anymore. They got unbelievable accolades and recognition for being the most successful, diverse community in the state of Vermont. I have I just wanted to say that, because I don't think it does any good to say us against them, and they're all one way and we're the other. Because if you do that, you're separating yourself from them as much as you think they're separating us from them. So that would be my preference. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think there being no business before Frank could go home.
Thank you very much.
We'll be getting our pound of flesh out of you in budget season, so I think it's
it's happening.
committee mission statements. So what I'm thinking might be a better way to proceed with this is if I could have all committee chairs send me their mission statements, and then I could forward them to the board, and rather than try to post something at 8, 10 at night,
Without having seen it before.
without having seen it before, which is my pet peeve as a board member. So I won't do it to you. Maybe can every board member, and I will nag you mercilessly for the next 3 days to get me the mission statements for all council committee chairs, so that we can put this on the next time.
Just one thing too before Frank goes.
Yeah, oh, sorry.
Go ahead. We can agree to that and be done with it.
Okay, does that sound good to everybody?
By when, sorry?
So I'd love to have it by the weekend, so I can send it out to people, and people have a chance to read it.
2 weeks, yeah.
Well, I would say that we've been very ruthless in the finance committee. We don't have a clerk, and we don't have a vice chair, and we also don't have a mission statement, and I don't think we've worked on this.
Okay, so the finance committee, which I sit on, can have a little more time.
All right, thank you.
Okay, fine, by next. Every committee that has it, could they please get it to me? If a committee has done their mission statement, please get it to me by the weekend. Committees that haven't, that are meeting, please get it together and get it to me as quickly as possible. Finance committee will have to scratch something together, but that's probably the easiest one to do, because everybody knows what finance committee does, so we don't get all of Sunday. So, does that seem reasonable? Do I have head nodding? Excellent.
Yeah, I just want to ask about if we wanted, there are a bunch of things that, now that we're a global budget, it would be nice to have sort of programmatic numbers for, as opposed to in different places. It came up when we were looking at the audits, and there were 2 places that the audits were in the SU budget. And there are things like transportation, athletics, music, arts, staff, like how much do we expend on administrative staff, how much on teaching staff, how much on the behavior programs, counselors and social workers, the restorative justice program. It'd be nice to have those in sort of all put just in one number, so we can kind of look at the things we're putting, the things we're spending money on. Is that what we want to be doing? And I'm not sure. I would think with a spreadsheet it's pretty easy to do, because
so you recall our discussion about the way the chart of accounts is organized, and there are 4 sort of main presentation formats, and I would have anticipated we'd have this conversation about what is the preference of the board in terms of presenting the information. So the 4 formats are, you're accustomed to seeing things by site, that's at location. You know, you're accustomed to seeing data by school site. So that's what you saw on Monday night at the supervisory union. But as you recall, that chart of accounts that we talked about, a second format is the function, and that's sort of what you're getting at, which is direct instruction, student support, and so on. And then the third format is what's called the object code, which is salary, benefits, supplies, energy, that kind of thing. And then the fourth is the program. So the program is regular ed, special ed, after school, athletics, food service, those are all separate programs. So those are the ways the system is designed, and it's anticipated that we would share information in those variety of formats.
Yeah, I know we definitely want to keep getting them by school, at least for the first couple of years.
We can
until
do-
we get used
yep,
to that.
we can do both.
Yeah, so I'm not sure, how would we, but also it would be nice to get some of those by program.
Yeah, we can do both formats. We can do subsets of data. So those are good conversations to have. And it definitely is a benefit of all of the hard work of reconfiguring the chart of accounts. That does add more detail, more refinement, so we can look at things different ways.
We just had this, I'm going to take up everybody's time for a minute, but we got a report last night at the select board from the Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation. We asked them to do an economic report for Brattleboro, and I thought they'd have a few little charts and stuff. They did about 40 pages of every bit of data that the state collects about this town and put it into really useful format. And I found myself sitting there saying, I'm going to stop complaining about the state requiring us to give all this data, because if we ever looked at it, it would probably be pretty valuable. So,
yeah, that hasn't. It's been a disappointment for business managers, I assume, boards, that our agency of ed has not kept up very well with compiling the data in a usable format. You can go in and you can do certain kind of searches, but they're really limited. And I wouldn't be surprised if the most recent financial information that we all send in August for the most recent fiscal year, I would not be surprised if it's still, it's 2019 now, it's probably 2018 or 2017 data. And it's frustrating because I always enjoyed providing boards with comparative data that says, oh, here's how you are, and then this is your peer group across the state. And I have to provide the same data set that I did 2 years ago because they haven't updated the data. But it's coming. I think it's coming.
All right. Thank you, Frank.
Sure.
So, athletic field study funding, that is not happening tonight.
I will be sending you information that Steve has collected so that you'll have a chance to read it, and then he'll be with us next time.
and we'll be, I don't know if he's compiled a list of the goals that whoever we wind up contracting with or whatever, we put out a request or something. I don't know if he has a list of goals, but that was one of the things we want to say. We're going to be doing that in for equity goals as well. If we're going to hire somebody, it'd be pretty important to know what we're going to want them to do.
Do you already have it, or it's pending him finishing it?
He sent me a document tonight, while he's considering. So I don't know if it has what you're asking for. When I send it out, it'll come to you tonight at some point. If there's something different that you're looking for, we should give him time.
Yeah.
I mean, next week is not a good week. I'm trying not to ask principals to work Wednesday through Friday. So sooner would be better.
Notice the principals were looking very carefully. Okay, so VSBA annual meeting update, that was rolled in for a previous discussion. There has been many requests along the way to find a way to post all the board communications that come to the full board on the WSESU website. So this is kind of a formal request to see if there's some way to do that, especially with all the turf things going on. I collect everything and send them out to the board attached to the updated agenda, but that's not posting for the public, and if it goes out to the full board, it is a public document. Now, you do not have to post every public document. That's not a requirement, but if somebody requested it, we do have to be able to produce it, so every board member has a copy of communications that come to the full, that are intended for the full board. So I think it's just a request to see if central office and the wizards that run the website and Barb, the empress of everything, have an idea of some way this might be able to happen.
Is there a section under your agendas, under your portion the board portion that says communications?
No.
I wonder, I'll find out from IT if we could add that, and that might be a place where we could.
And I can just post them there.
Yeah.
If they go on with the minutes or with the agenda, like you send it out with the new agenda.
Right, and
They
that
could
can
run.
be attached.
Yeah, it's really just a matter of transferring the documents onto the website.
That somebody has to put it on.
Yeah,
and be
yeah,
responsible.
well, and I think that, given that, we're trying to be as transparent as possible, I think one of the things that we should be talking about as we get into the budget is some staff. If the current staff is really overwhelmed with work and we can't do something like, can't get something like that done, I think we need to look at staff and board. I'm not sure, we'd have to look at what we want them to do and what the job would be, but we can't not do things because staff is overwhelmed. I mean, we have responsibilities in the public, and it's particular on transparency.
There is a section on information, which is like where your PowerPoint is, but I don't think that's sufficient.
I'll just see if we can, communications should make it clear to people at least.
The things that came in.
Things that came in. So I'll find that out.
With all these things though, like cleverness in implementation is very helpful. So, because if it's onerous, then we have to hire staff, and that's not what we need to do. If we can find a clever way to do it, if I can just post it somehow versus putting it on, versus cutting and clunkily pasting it onto everybody's updated agenda, that might be a more elegant solution and the same amount of work for the board chair. Maybe even less. Yes, Jody.
Jody, I didn't hear some of the conversation, so I may be redundant here. You made a comment that we could request something that we wanted, but if we don't know what you've got for communications, how could we request it? So I would encourage that anything of interest, if you get a communication saying nice weather today, I don't want it, you don't have to post that, but if it's of interest, I would like to be able to see it.
So I'm going to say that it would put a lot of stress on the board chair to determine what is of interest for a 10-person board and a 4-district, because I pretty much know what you would like to see. And I will tell you, I don't know of a board that posts communications, so I've never seen it, and it's not a requirement. So while we're looking at this, I just think we're sort of in uncharted waters and just how you do this. And I don't want to post a communication to somebody that may not want it going out. I also have to screen it very carefully because it might be something about my child. So it's not available to everybody in the public. So there's it's not quite just the stick it into a black box and it goes up, because I would certainly, if it was sent to me and it said specifically to share it to the board, then I do. If I feel like it concerns the whole board and it doesn't have specific information, it's, but we really need to be thoughtful if it identifies a family or a child or anything else. So, especially in this small community, it's still a small community. So we'll have to come up with a policy about how to handle that information too, I think, so that nobody goes.
And check the statute too, to see what we have to do. Check the statute to see what we're required to do. I talked into my hand.
So we are now down to, so we'll discuss that more at length if we have a good proposal next time. I'll put that on the next agenda. Maybe we can put that one, get that one up and running. Appointment of leadership council members. How are we gonna do this? I've been given a plan for this very well. Do we have a list of all the members?
Of all, maybe pull up the email that I sent you that has the...
Right, that's what
I wonder if this isn't something that we should take another another shot at, because I think we didn't really we provided a list of the responsibilities for the amendment and the policy, but we didn't really articulate how people would apply or who could be involved, and we didn't get a very big response from the public. So what I was going to suggest is that the communications committee, when they got nothing else to do, put together a draft that's sort of like an instruction or a primer or some kind of a guide to what we actually are looking for as far as identifying people and getting people on the committee, and then what we sort of expect them to be doing. I think the lack of response and there's been some partial information as far as the teachers that didn't know that they were actually eligible to be on the council. So it just seems like maybe we should just step back and reboot the process. Now that we've got the amendment and the policy in place.
Having leadership council scheduled to meet
Yeah.
tomorrow.
So
Yeah.
so we should probably.
Sorry, this was, yeah.
What are the numbers currently on each? Have they changed? Meaning the numbers of participants?
It varies by town.
So Putney has, I believe, 5 people that have sent letters.
5 community reps.
Parent community, yep. Guilford has 4. Dummerston has 1, but Julianne just told me today that she got another one. So there are 2 from Dummerston. Let's see, 1 from Academy and 1 from Oak Grove.
And none from Green Street.
None from Green Street yet. I believe the high school has gotten 1.
And this doesn't include, these are people who are from the community or parents, not teachers.
Correct. I don't know how many teachers.
We could appoint the Putney, because they're planning to meet, we could officially appoint the Putney members so they can officially meet, and then continue to do work and do some outreach and talk about that maybe next meeting and get this moving. So
Guilford's
that
also meeting this week.
Guilford is? Oh, and do I have this? So that seems like it's ready, if they're ready to go.
Can we just appoint the slate?
Right.
Without the names?
Dummerston, when I talked to Julianne recently, they're going to try to get a meeting in before December break. And those are the only 3 schools that have.
Too much to do.
So I'm working out the slate here. So I would entertain a motion.
I would make a motion that we appoint members to leadership councils that have expressed interest and written a letter to the principals. Well, I think we can do it wherever. It might generate more interest. And I know John's ready.
I only have 3 on the letter, 3 for John.
I think I sent you one separately.
Separately?
Yeah,
Okay.
it just came in last week.
I mean, we don't need names specifically, you said.
I can give them to you.
Or, I mean, if we're just gonna, I mean, I probably wouldn't even know the people from Putney, but if we're just gonna appoint people, if they've expressed interest and written a letter and it's been vetted by the principal.
Why don't we just list the names so that it's
Okay.
clear and transparent, because it's.
Okay.
Yeah, so, well, you want to amend the motion to, let's do, what do you have ready to go, Guilford or Putney?
I have Putney and Guilford.
Okay,
I
so,
would amend the motion to deal with them by town. Putney first.
Putney first. And so I would entertain a motion, I want to amend that motion. And you're gonna put the names on your motion, Lyle will read off. I'm kind of trying to do
It
a
seems a little cumbersome.
So
I mean,
you
just
put-
having a name doesn't really say that much. I
Well, why don't you just
mean,
list up, just so that
when
they,
we
just so,
appointed Thomas to the board, I had no idea who he was. It works out fine.
So the Guilford names so the Guilford appointees, are you just want to like list them off and then we'll just.
Guilford first or Putney first?
Guilford, Putney first?
Well, he said Putney.
You said Putney, oh, sorry.
Okay, I'm going to tell you the names. Okay, Emily Pals, Tara Castine, Ellen Strong, Liz Adams, and Jamie Contois.
Ruby Mackey from
I don't have a letter from you, sorry.
I have an email from her
Okay.
that
Let's
everybody know.
include Ruby in that.
But that's also only the community members. And so from Putney, we can inform you of the staff who are interested and are meeting tomorrow at 4 o'clock.
I think the board is supposed to appoint the community members just as a way to do it.
Not the staff members?
So the staff members kind of decide amongst themselves. They're already hired staff members. They're already kind of vetted.
And we wanted them to choose their own representatives.
So we didn't.
Well, that was part of what WSESU conversation, what we had talked the last time, is that through conversations we've been having at school, there's teachers that have signed up and are now on the list that previously were not on the list. So this is part of that communication stuff, sorry.
So that is part of the communication stuff, that it was not our intent to have the board weigh in on staff so much, but have staff decide about staff. So we have the names. So was there a second to that motion, Megan?
I'm sorry. There's actually another person, Marie Kim, is another parent who has been informed by her that she's on the committee.
I'm glad we lifted the names. So let's add Marie Kim to that list. And was there a second on Sean's motion?
Yes, second.
Thank you. All those in favor of me? Oh, yeah, sorry.
So we're essentially like, because I'm just wondering about the process. So the principal gathers these people, and if there were, let's say, 20 people, he would have to then read through to figure out a number that seemed, we would.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
I mean, because he's forwarding them to us, so he's vetting that. I mean, I don't know these people, but like, let's say I didn't know them. He's vetting them, or we're just getting them all? At this point, we're just getting them all. Yeah, because there's not so many people. Okay.
Did you ever get letters?
We got some of these letters, but not others.
Yeah.
I think the language of the policy at least made pretty clear that we were supposed to just be transmitted letters. Like the principal wasn't supposed to say like, I like this one, but not that one. We were just supposed to send them all. We just.
So if the principal has more letters, he's gotten letters recently, they haven't come to me, because the ones that I've read are the ones that
Any other questions? All those in favor of the appointment of the listed members to the Leadership Council, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions? The ayes appear to have it, the ayes do have it. And moving on to the appointment of the Guilford Leadership Council. Tasha.
And they're actually meeting tomorrow too, because I'm going to be there at 1 o'clock. I think.
Friday.
Oh, Friday? I thought it was the 21st.
I'm going on Friday. But maybe I won't see you.
I'm losing the floor momentum here.
So do you want the motion?
So I'd love a motion on that. Sean, you want to make a motion to appoint the Guilford?
Yes, I would like to make a motion that we, the WSESU board, do the appointment of the leadership councils for the town of Guilford. And the names are as follows.
Tasha Tillman, Beth Bristol, Aaron Kachuk, and Alexis Malchavides.
Is there a second on the motion? Thank you, Emily. All those in favor of the appointment of the Guilford Leadership Council members, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays or abstentions? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. And we have 2 leadership councils. Woo.
Did Guilford and Putney do they just have more active, well, I don't want to say that. So did they do something different in their outreach? No.
They're all here.
So
You got a lot of us. It went out in an email, or the school newsletter, telling us to, say who we are, why we wanted to be on it, what could we bring to it, da-da-da-da.
I know in Guilford, John has been really proactive, and a lot of those members are former board members.
Yeah. Moving on to next agenda items. Oh, sorry, Ruby.
Sorry, Ruby Matthew from Putney. I have a nagging feeling about this, and so I just checked your policy, the leadership council policy that you just adopted. And it does say members shall be appointed by the board. And to me, that means including staff members. And I say this because I do think that there was an email that went out, there was in our newsletter, it was on Facebook. But I think that the outreach, I'm not sure about the outreach to staff. And I know that, what David had mentioned about thinking about can we reboot it with the other towns that don't have active leadership councils? You might have direction to your principals, but I read that policy as putting it in your hands to appoint not just community members, but all members of those leadership councils.
Doesn't it say?
Policy and amendment, and because I remember it was particularly, we were speaking, and maybe our language was not betrayed, are thinking about that. Or maybe my memory betrays me, because that's entirely possible.
And I'm certain that if that was the intent, then it was my mistake, because I've never understood it to be that the board would be appointing anyone other than parents and community.
Right, that was the conversation that I recollect. So we can revisit the policy and revisit it in policy amendment and work on our communications and outreach. We just really want to get these boards up and running. We still have a lot to go, so I'm going to keep charging along. Items for next agenda, I have, there was a request by David to see if we could have a small presentation on restorative justice, since we're doing so much work around that, and it seems to be an important topic that might be good for the board to hear about, so something on the 20 to 25 minute range for our next meeting. We're having the high school initial budget meeting, kind of like, well, not high school, that's not right, PUHS number 6, that's misspoken, and WRCC, mistyped. So we'll have our initial look-see at their budget. Team Tenny has asked to be on the next agenda. We're looking at mission statements and getting back together again on the communications posting. So that's what I have for now. If you have anything else, send it to me in the next week.
The athletic field study also.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, we should have that. Yep, thank you.
What was that?
The athletic field funding. We got a table.
Yes, Jody.
You put on the agenda item about getting microphones. It really is very difficult listening to.
This is a hard room.
Huh?
This is, yeah.
Huh?
This is a hard room.
I think just a couple of them. Okay, thank you.
It's really awful to use microphones because it's slow to me now, so that's the downside.
Well, if you have to pass them around, but we need something that you could have 2 or 3 of them between the two of you would be great.
And then send it out to me, I'll see what we can do. PreK partnership. I would entertain a motion to approve a PreK partnership contract with
Mount Snow Childcare.
So moved.
I have a motion from Kelly and a second from David. Any discussion? All those in favor of the approval?
No, that was, I haven't seen this. What is
Oh, so this is a way that families can, so we get money and get to count PreK students that are in approved PreK programs as a .46 student, which amounts to in our current district about $8,000. And so then we send $3,100 per pupil of that $8,000 to qualified PreK partnerships, PreK programs that have gone through this process. They have to have a STARS rating, they have to meet a certain criteria. So it is a win-win for everybody. Families get assistance that will pay for up to 10 hours of childcare, not childcare, PreK, sorry. So they get funding for that. We get money to administer this, and in the case of our in-house program, we count them as 0.46, and we get $8,000 to support the in-house pre-K program. Any other questions? All those in favor of approving the WSSD pre-K partnership agreement with Mount Snow Child Care, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays, abstentions? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The motion carries, and I will send this down to Tim as well for signing. Moving on, vote results discussion and use of school communication. So, congratulations, we have 4 approved amendments. Oh, dang it. Forgot to send Chris Mays a statement. Oh, well.
Paper hasn't gone to bed yet.
No, 7 o'clock, I had to do it by 7 o'clock. It's doing so well. I knew I must have screwed up. So we could send a statement out to the press to be printed later, yes. Tim?
Lyle had sent me an email earlier today asking about whether there'd be a press release. And so I sent it to everyone when I initially got here. I just drafted something sitting in my car. So it's not great, but it's a start. And we keep running into this timing problem where we don't have a board meeting, we have a press release that has to go out, and we keep sending to Christina and Drew. But ideally, I prefer not to do it that way.
I agree with you.
Prefer to come to the full board. So I just sent it, even though I know it'll be really hard for people to look at it. But
I wonder if, I know it's, there's going to be an article tomorrow, but I wonder if it wouldn't be a better idea or a good idea to sort of draft a more of a narrative about, thanks to the community for supporting this, and we put a lot of time in as well. And then all of us just sign it and send it to the 2 papers. Or have somebody draft something and just like send a thank you around. The reformer prints thank yous on Monday.
Monday. So I have a suggestion, if I can find it.
In the parking lot.
yeah, it's like my car there.
So Chris Mays asked me for a statement. I said I could make a personal statement. I prefer to have the board do it, and then I've messed this up. So if we wanted to, we could take my personal statement and kind of recraft that really quickly. So my personal comment was I thank the WSESD board, the transition board, legacy boards, and study committee for the tremendous amount of work that informed the creation of amendments that the majority of voters in all our communities could support. I also thank the voters that took time to educate themselves and weigh in on these questions. The passage of all the amendments addresses the biggest concerns from all our communities. This gives me great hope that our MERS district can work together productively for all of our children and taxpayers. After 5 years of working on governance, I am looking forward to putting a laser focus on the many challenges and opportunities in educating all of our WSESD students. So, so that was my personal comment.
Change the eyes to we's.
So that's what I'm thinking is like.
It's just we're very grateful for the support of the community, just a specific statement. Yeah, that's.
Yes, Sean, you don't like it.
No, it's fine.
Okay.
It's fine. But what I like to do after a vote is get all the information to make a spreadsheet. And it's not quite as rosy as what you just talked about. There's specific towns that did specific things, that made specific decisions. And so it's the numbers don't really show a rosy unification. I'd be happy to forward this.
I think we got that from our.
No, I mean.
But we have one from our.
We have one, and that's on.
But I don't know if
And I used her numbers to put in.
But what I did was added up like all the checklist numbers, and so 6% of the population voted in the whole district. Brattleboro's turnout was 3.7%. Emerson was 11.9%. Guilford was 5.3%. and Putney was 11.3%. And Putney and Dummerston both voted overwhelmingly not to increase representation for the town of Brattleboro. So, I mean, it contains a lot of information, so I wouldn't necessarily, from my perspective, looking at the demographics, I wouldn't say, yes, this is wonderful. I think the outcome is good.
So I think it's the first time that we put something in front of the voters that they've approved, and I think that's a really...
Well, we have the vote on the 21st of May. And also, I got the cost, which was also interesting. So a special election cost is approximately $1,350, and there were 816 voters. So every voter cost $1.66.
Well, we didn't pay them. I just wanted to be clear.
Well, the towns are going to build WSESU.
It's not as bad as I expected.
No, it isn't. It isn't, because it was done a lot less expensive than
all our friends
our previous May 21st. So I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but
well, I'm going to say
They're going to be anyway.
I'm going to say that there were a lot of things happening that informed those votes and had people really changing their votes in the Dummerston Putney area. I know this for a fact. And so I prefer not to linger on, stuff.
I would prefer not to.
So
I just had to say that because I love numbers.
I
I
do.
like to sit down and do numbers.
And then that makes me go, what happened there? And so I'm going to say that it's the net result, I think, is good, and I'm going to concentrate on that. And we have passed article amendments. We have articles that are approved by a majority of our voters, however that happens. So we can just be happy for a minute. Yes,
I
David.
just want to point out the one, I think, really positive example, and I think it's going to, and I think getting the numbers out is a really good idea because then people can see the specifics of it. But the Brattleboro voters that came out in the snow to vote voted 2-1 to protect the interests of the surrounding towns, and despite an effort to get them to not vote that way. And a pretty good. What's that?
Where was that illustrated?
2 and 3.
2 and 3, the Brattleboro votes on number 2 and number 3. It was 2-1 in favor in both cases from Brattleboro voters. And I think that's a really good indication that, there is, and I think if
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I agree.
I think that's a really positive thing. But the positive thing is that we passed all 4 of these that we worked just almost endlessly on.
Yeah.
And we still can't just put it to bed now with the thank you note to the voters.
To be honest, though, I'm not entirely certain to me, because I don't know what people's motivation was, that Brattleboro voters necessarily voted in those numbers for 2 and 3 out of concern for the outlying town, so much as they did in their own suburbs. And my thought, when I initially saw an argument opposed to these 2 amendments, I'll just say, but I thought, I don't know that Brattleboro voters will see it that way, because they may read it and think, that protects me too. I mean, look at the way it went with the Act 46 vote, years ago at this point.
I think that knowing the history of the merger process and the articles and the study committee and the alternative and all of that, I think that there's pretty broad, particularly the people that took the time to vote, there's pretty broad understanding of what the issues are. And I think it's a reasonable conclusion. You can't say for sure, but I think it's a reasonable conclusion to draw. Well, I'm hopeful that they did it because they want us to get on with the work of educating the kids.
So I just want, Jody, quickly.
Well, Tim just took one of my comments because it had been talked about the study committee about, we can close one of Brattleboro. So I think Brattleboro was pretty aware of that. The other one is before you get into numbers and percentages, I think you have to be very careful because I have different percentages, for example, from Lori and Dummerston than what Sean just had. And I had different percentages for Putney than what Sean had. So I think you need to before you make those kinds of things public, you want to make sure they're right.
Well, we have the results from Barb, so that's all we can go on.
I got these numbers from Lori and John.
You got 11.7 from Lori? She gave us 11.
11.9.
No, I'll have to check with her because that's about the number she gave us when we counted last night. So, and then, you
That's
know,
not a big difference.
So, yeah, just send
So-
Barb's official tally.
and
Is that gonna be online, on the page that we're
Putting out a thing.
Thank you.
Well,
We made a motion.
the numbers are public.
I move that we approve Christina's thank you statement with amending we instead of I, and we send that to the rest.
So we're not gonna thank ourselves for WSESD. I thank
And all of our names rather than just the board.
Sure.
Great. I prefer that.
So there was Emily made the motion, there was a second?
That was me.
Thank you. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays, abstentions, the ayes appear to have it. I will rush that up and send it to the reformer in the thanks section.
And the comments too.
And the
They'll put
comments,
it in
thank
next
you.
Wednesday.
And the comments, yeah. I was thinking about Chris Mays responding to him, and I got that.
And maybe put it in all the school newsletters.
We can.
Yeah, you send it to me.
I'll send it to
A
you
little
too.
Thanksgiving
Yeah.
gift.
Actually, should I just send it to communications and communications can disseminate it? Or should I do it?
Send it to Barbara.
Okay. All right. Nice try, Christina. I
Now we have a
just
quorum.
want to reiterate and make it very clear on, so a couple issues on communications and board communications, and one I had to actually pick up and call the VSBA just today about. So one is that, and I think we did a good job because people were complaining to me right and left that my PowerPoint that I threw together was very neutral and did not tell them how to vote. It was a constant complaint I heard, so I think I hit the mark on making it a neutral, informative PowerPoint. So anytime communications are going out through any school-related document, website, flyer, we have to be on point throughout the district that we are not advising people to vote in any direction. And
In an official document.
in an official document. Now, I had a concern from a citizen saying that somebody had personally posted a letter from a non-board member on a website. And this was a violation. And I checked with the VSBA, and we actually still get to be humans in our own life. We should probably strive to say, I am posting this as a citizen, not as a board member. I think that's a helpful disclaimer. But we as board members can weigh in. We should take care to do it, make sure we only do it in things that are our own personal vehicles. And I think it is a good practice to say, I am speaking as a citizen, which I do every time unless I have the full board behind me pretty much. So I got that clarification today. Any other questions, thoughts, problems on that? Great. Moving on. Discussion about interim steps for COGS or dogs to comply with a new dog policy. So I sent around a link to the Canine Good Citizen process, which is a sort of therapy dog light as a way to determine if some of the dogs that are in, as a way to comply and help people get into compliance with policy but not have to have them spend their Thanksgiving break doing it. So I spoke with Tammy McNamara over at Vermont, New Hampshire Vet Clinic and a parent at Dummerston as well, and she suggested that the Canine Good Citizenship would be a really good short-term qualification for dogs that are in the system, and that then people could go forward with therapy dog certification. Our policy says that dogs must be therapy dogs. So in terms of finding a way to sort of assure that the dogs in short order are reasonably capable of being therapy dogs, we could go with this Canine Good Citizen test, and then we could move on and have required compliance with therapy dogs by X and such a date. So that is my proposal. Canine Good Citizen is like a 2 or 3 hour thing where an AKC certified evaluator, 5 of them in the area, like, test the dog. And it's pretty low priced, it's like $20 or something. And then certified therapy dog, the one that I found in Northampton, I think it's 2 6-hour classes with an evaluation at the end, and it's like an hour-long evaluation or something with a AKC certified therapy dog evaluator. And I think that's like a $200 or $300 process for a dog, maybe less than that. I think it was it was not, you know, beyond $200. I'm gonna say it was closer to $100.
I would make a motion that we adopt Christina just.
And can we put a time frame on that for the meetings?
Yes, until it would be an interim policy.
So could I make a recommendation, a friendly amendment, even though it's not a friendly amendment, but rather than make an amendment, could I ask you to add this, that the Canine Good Citizen be implemented by January 1? That any dogs in the schools would have to be, like, after January 1, 2020,
Okay.
and before the start of the next school year, all dogs must be certified therapy dogs. All those in favor?
Can I throw one little?
Yeah.
Yeah, one little, it's flying the ointment. Do we want to articulate our understanding that that there may be important reasons for a dog from a family that can't afford even that small fee to be included in this process, and that the district will consider exceptions? I mean, you make people self-identify and put them on the spot, and they have to come and tell you they can't afford it, but I'm just wondering if there's
So
some way.
this isn't like families are bringing their dogs into schools. These are like coming with staff, and they're to helping in the school and the classroom.
And there are no parents or no kids that they're bringing their dog in because it really calms the kid. There's not. Okay, great. Never mind. Okay. Never mind the fly.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, Jody.
Jody, Normandy, why wouldn't you stay with the Good Citizen dog all the time then? Why go with a more expensive
It's a
one?
little higher level of training, and I think it's 2 6-hour classes. I don't think that's a huge, like if it.
A dog can pass the good citizen thing, but yet not be great with kids and what a kid would do. And that's
I would have figured differently. Okay, I don't know. I would have figured differently. But
I checked them out.
all right. Okay, that makes sense.
I think we have to think about liability, and I think we have to think about all the kids, and so we have to think about this big district and how policies look. And so I think this is a way to make it easier on programs that are relying on dogs in a certain way, but I think it gives us that kind of assurance. So, yes.
Is this just for dogs who are already present in the
Yeah.
Is that going to be in here? Your motion thing? Because some staff.
So let's restate the motion. May I restate it for you? Dogs that are currently working within schools in the WSESD shall be allowed to remain in their current roles. Boy, this is really stinky. After January 1, with completion of Canine Good Citizenship certification. After January 1, 2020, they are allowed to stay. Does that make sense, Tim?
I wonder if we should.
I think so. Like misunderstood before, but I think I
Okay.
I wonder if just because between now and January 1 is all these holidays, that maybe we should make it February 1 so that people have time. Or it's just.
But for principals and staff, that's going to be the time they can do it.
Oh, duh.
And
Watch a movie or something.
starting with school year 2020, well, I want to say like August 2020, starting with school year 2020, all dogs in schools must be certified therapy dogs. Does that grab the motion?
Yeah, we've already passed that.
But I'm just restating the motion.
Yep. Second.
Or service, right? Because if they're a service
Yeah.
dog, then there's already a certification there, so we want to get
that's.
They don't even have to.
They don't even have to, we can't, that's,
I know,
Yeah.
but in your motion, you might want.
no,
Is
we
that,
can't.
is that separate?
That we couldn't, that's
Okay.
separate for a whole pile of reasons.
Perfect.
So that was the motion, who seconded that, I forget.
You gave the motion.
Well, I restated your motion.
Oh,
Seconded, okay, great.
David seconded.
David seconded, okay, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions? The ayes appear to have it, the ayes do have it, let's put those dogs to bed.
Who thought we would become such experts?
Oh, now
You're getting punchy.
aye. So the superintendent's search discussion. So I just wanted to have the initial discussion that we unfortunately will be having a very sad shopping trip to find someone to fill Lyle's fabulous shoes. And so there are options, and I don't know, we're not deciding this tonight, but we gotta get cracking because the good ones are gonna be off the shelf and it's budget season, so. David had a suggestion that the select board has been through a process for searching.
Yeah, there are two people, well, Curtis Reed, because the select board and the school board both have a commitment to diversifying staff. But Curtis Reed and Jennifer Jacobs, who is a professional recruitment person and really effective, contracted with the district to help us find a human resources professional for the town because it's gotten to be big. And they were incredibly effective. The breadth of the search and the candidates that, and there were 16 candidates that we were actually, not me into the sustainability. There were at least a dozen candidates that were really interested in it, and 6 or 7 that any one of them would have been fine. And we wound up with the absolute top choice. And what they did a campaign that identified all the things that are really terrific about the town, all the initiatives that are underway, the training, recent trainings and staff, the fiscal structure and the quality of the employees and the administrative team, and then just the characteristics of the town and the sort of the forward-looking aspects of the town. It just really sold the community, and we attracted somebody from Massachusetts who wasn't really thinking about moving to Brattleboro, but and this is a really, I mean, there are a lot of initiatives, a lot of creativity in this district. Things are really pretty stable, other than being in Vermont. You never quite know what's going to happen, but it's really, and our salaries are comparable, so I think we could probably attract a pretty significant group of people if we hire some, use some professionals to do that process. But I think that's something for us all to talk about. It was just an idea that I had because it worked really well with the town. We used a similar process to identify sustainability coordinator, and we're down to 2. We again had 7 people that we had in for interviews actually because there were so many good respondents. And it's a really effective. They're professionals in the business, and they know the outreach, and they know the processes, and they know how to attract people and where to look. But I think separately from that, I think what we should do right now is identify 2 or 3 people to start putting together a plan, because we really need to develop really good relationships with our administrators right now and find out what they want, where they think we should be moving, what do they want from leadership, because it most directly affects them. And the same with the staff. And I don't know if there'd be a series of surveys or whatever, but I just think if a couple of people should sit down and think about this as a kind of how do we want to conduct this campaign?
Well, and it would have to be an SU level committee too, so we have to have some Vernon folks on board, which is good because.
And we meet Monday, so we can take it up.
So, yes.
I would like to say that in the last process when Lyle was hired, that it was an internal search, and it's turned out to be extremely successful. So I wouldn't be in favor of necessarily not doing, making it available to candidates that would already be within the WSESD.
Certainly would be made available,
Yeah. So it's important to say that.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Oh.
If
It's just that it's gonna be an open, I'm just saying it needs to be an open process.
Yeah.
But absolutely,
Yeah.
I hope we find somebody from within this really group that we really
Yeah,
want.
somebody that's familiar, I mean, you know, it's, we've been lucky for the last couple of years.
Yes, we have. We definitely have, yes. No,
Hard
so-
worker and,
And we burned around.
So we are having an SU meeting on Monday night for budgeting, but I think this probably needs to be put on there. So is there anybody that's interested on being on a superintendent search committee from the WSESD?
I'm good. I would do for,
Okay.
to start with.
I might join too, but
Well, we're all gonna be involved, it's just to come up with.
but it's part of the initial committee, yeah. Oh, yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
and you know, I wasn't too familiar with the search committee for a superintendent, and Lyle was, because Ron had been there for 15 years, so there hadn't been that. And there were all kinds of community groups that got together and did interviews, and so there was a pretty, I don't know if the Vermont School Board Association helped with that, or whether that was something that was done in-house. Yeah.
There were groups of community members, teachers, administrators, board members. Seemed like I was
Business
interested in
people,
that.
because it was really important to convince the board that, because we heard a lot about, what are you talking about? You're not even gonna look? But that process was so overwhelmingly supportive that we all just kind of said, okay, job, yeah.
But I think we use that similar process in the principal hiring process.
Yep, and I think
that was very
we're gonna want to
effective.
involve those groups as well. It's just, how are we gonna do it? That's what we'll work out.
I mean, there is a model, so I'm sure there was documentation on how the last one was accomplished. So there is a model there.
Yes.
I just want to throw in the fact that when we were hiring our principal in Dummerston, that Lyle ran a wonderful program.
That's what I just said.
Oh, I didn't hear you. See, I can't hear you. She ran an excellent program. We had, 19 people apply, and she ran it very, very well.
But our three most recent principal hires, the same thing, very inclusive process, and that's really what we want to do.
And I would presume, or maybe I shouldn't presume, but I'll ask a question. Since Ron helped in the previous process, would you also be available?
I will do whatever it is that you think would be most helpful. And if it's creating, this is what we do with principals, or this is the path that I went through, and giving that to you, and then stepping back, or I can certainly find administrators. There are already administrators who expressed interest in being involved in the process. So whatever it is that you would like, I'm happy to.
That was in place.
So they're in place by June 30th.
You want the summer off, huh?
So we'll bring this up at the next SU meeting, and we have some people willing to sort of put in some of the work. Thank you, Lyle, for volunteering as well to put in some of the work. We have come, yes, Ruby.
I just wanted to just highlight something that David said and remind the board. At the annual meeting when Curtis Reed spoke, he spoke pretty eloquently about hiring and recruiting and thinking about a culture of a school district and in a town. And I really would urge you to reach out to him. I mean, I think that it's really an important thing for us to think about at any kind of a high-level change like this.
Thank you. Moving on, any public comment on non-agenda items? Because there was everything on this agenda, so I can't imagine we left anything. Oh, Tara, well done, yes.
As we discussed earlier, there was the vote for additional board members to be added in Brattleboro. We're also up in 2020 for quite a few members on the existing board to be replaced. I would like to make sure on the docket for board meetings and communication is how do you put your name on the ballot? how do you apply, what's the process, and making sure we do like we did with the merged board, where we have a very concise informational meetings with the community members. We get to ask questions, we get to see who we're ultimately going to vote for as the 2 additional people from Brattleboro, and also as replacements for said people who are leaving, or if they are going to put their name back in the hat, that would be nice to know as well.
Yeah, I think that's policy amendments, sort of because it's finishing up on the amendments. So I think that's on our docket for our next meeting, and then working with communications to make sure the word gets out, because we got to figure out what the seats are.
Yeah,
And
and Barb will count the days when people have to have taken out the petitions and have them back in and all of that.
It's coming up.
Really nice to
It's coming
see a concise document of what those days and rules are available to people, so that if we're talking to somebody who's interested, or we all can be directed to the same document for the same set of information. That'd be really nice to put out there.
It's even more complex now, because we have to figure out what the terms of the 2 new people are going to be.
that's the first thing we have to do.
Because Emily's term is up, yours was 1 year, mine is 2, so we're gonna have 3 Brattleboro people coming on, and they can't all be 3, so it's.
No, it's a mess, so, yeah,
It's a mess.
that has to go back to the attorney.
Another
It's all
mess.
statutorily, that has to go back to the attorney. We just
Yeah.
didn't tackle it, because if it didn't pass, we'd be spending money on the attorney, and if it didn't pass, that's a waste of money. So, yes, Liz?
Just so it isn't as rushed as the last one, because that last one was like really rushed. So make sure you get it together, so, maybe,
The last vote, you mean, like the one we just had?
No, well, this,
Oh, the petitions, yeah.
yeah, so.
But we have more time now.
Maybe the expectation that they would go to each town.
Well, the voting will occur on town meeting.
Yeah.
We have a deadline.
Yeah.
So the deadline, we know the deadlines, but we don't know what the seats are going to, what's going to be open.
It's 3 months away.
It's not that far away. It's not that far away, because we have to count 6 Mondays.
Yeah, but I mean, the vote is just
Exactly.
3 months away. Very
And
close.
it's not our meeting, it's the town meeting day, so it's really going to be mid-February. People are going to have to have petitions in.
I think it's even earlier than that. It may be the end of January. I'm just
Yeah,
counting
yeah,
back
you're right,
6
yeah.
Mondays.
Yeah, because there's only 1 week in March and then 4 in February, yeah. So, wow.
And I think it's 1% of the checklist in each town, so
Yeah.
it was 30 in Guilford, so.
28 Putney.
So we have to, we will iron everything out with the attorney. We'll have a policy amendment meeting coming up, sorry guys, and get those things ironed out to get a ballot together, so then we can figure out what petitions people take, can get the timeline to people. But we have a wee bit of time to get that done. So, there being no other public comment on non-agenda items, we have 2 executive sessions. 2 to discuss the evaluation of employee. I'd like to invite Lyle into that under 1 VSA 313, as well as another one on possible litigation, which I'd like to invite Lyle into as well. Do I have a motion?
That way I'm.
Thank you, Emily.
Not very far.
Any discussion? All those in favor of moving into executive session, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. We'll move into executive session. There will be no decision. You may go home.
We can go in there so that we can.